Hi, my name is Ryan Gitman. I am the owner of Underground Reptiles, and I've been asked the question, how did I start Underground Reptiles? That's a question that has a lot of facets, but I'll start with the time I was 22 and I moved down to Florida. After that thing passes over my head. I moved down to Florida because I knew there were snakes down here. Where I come from in the streets of New York, there were no snakes. Maybe sometimes we'd go to Central Park and we'd catch a garter snake once in a while, and that was like the most amazing highlight. But when I was in my early teens, 12, 13, 14 years old, I knew a guy named Buddy Shapiro. Buddy Shapiro told me about this place in Florida called The Shed. Joe Baraducci and Louis Porras owned it. And they used to send out a paper. This was before the internet, guys. If you're a kid and you're watching this, forget it. You're already lost. It's 40 plus years ago. And they used to send out a piece of paper, and you'd have to wait to get it in what's called the mail. And you open the mailbox and you'd unfold this thing, and it had a list of like 100 animals you can buy. And there were boa constrictors and anacondas, and there was a mammal page, and sometimes you get a squirrel monkey. It was just the craziest thing. And I always dreamed that someday I'd go down to Florida and I would someday be able to catch snakes in my backyard. So when I was 22 years old, 1988, I packed up my 73 Monte Carlo. It was a white car, but I painted it red with a paintbrush because me and another friend of mine, we did something we shouldn't have done with the car, and we didn't want people to see it, so we painted it red with a paintbrush. And we moved down to Florida. I moved down to Florida. He stayed there. I think he's dead. And I started catching snakes and sending them back to my friends. And then one day I was at the airport, and some guy at the airport who worked at Delta Airlines said to me, "You know about Strictly Reptiles?" And I said, "No. He shipped 100 rattlesnakes the other day." I was like, "Would you give me his number, please?" So he gave me his phone number. I called him up and I went down there and I started selling reptiles for him on the side. He would sell me reptiles on the side, and I'd ship them because he wasn't supposed to be shipping to certain people in New York because everybody back then had territories, and that wasn't his territory. So he'd sell them to me and I would send them there. And then he rented a room out of his old warehouse to me. It was actually a bathroom converted. And I put a phone in there, and I would take phone calls out of that bathroom. Then, eventually, when he moved out and bought a big building, I rented that whole space that he had. And then eventually I went and moved into Deerfield Beach. Now I'm skipping a lot of fun stories and a lot of cool things. But eventually, me and my friend Joel Silverstein from New York, he moved down here to hang out with me. We were driving down the highway one day, and he says, "You know, we should open up our own store." Like a retail store? Back then, there was no such thing as a reptile store. Nobody had a reptile. There's one reptile store. It was called the Reptile Store. It was in West Palm Beach, Ron DuPont. But other than that, everything was a pet store. Reptiles were a little section in the store. And he said, "Yeah, we should call it Underground Reptiles because we're underground." I was like, "God, that's a great idea. I like that name." So it was about a year later that instead of going into importing and exporting, which was what I was doing at the time, we opened up a retail store strictly for reptiles called Underground Reptiles. That was 1994. And that's how I started Underground Reptiles. There'll be a lot of fun stories to come, including pancake tortoises, spring haas, getting bit in the top of the finger by cobras, and a lovely time I had in prison.